Okay, so this is a video about how to solder, especially in regards to making a straight track, because that's what I'm going to make right now. But the process is going to be the same regardless of the track that you're building, as far as how to use a soldering iron and the safety procedures that we use for soldering irons. So the first thing that you need before you do any of this is you need gloves, which should be at your station, your soldering station. You need goggles. You also need some sort of non-flammable surface that you're working on at the soldering station. We're going to use a lot of tin foil because we don't want to use fire directly on wood, our wood tables, which, you know, we all know what happens when we combine fire and wood. That would not be good. So we also need, with regards to making a straight track, we need 2 of our jigs, which are going to help the track stay perfectly evenly spaced before we solder them. You need some flux, which will help bond the metals together. You need 2 long straight tracks, and then you need another piece of straight wire to cut up into smaller pieces that we'll use as supports that we're actually going to solder together. Okay, first thing you want to do, you should also have some sandpaper at the station that looks like this. This is called metal sandpaper. We're going to sand down all of our metal pieces. And the reason we do that is because it also helps the chemical bond. So we want to make sure that every piece is soldered, or I'm sorry, is sanded down. Okay, there's one piece. Here's another piece. You should just sand it till it looks kind of shiny. And then also the support pieces need to be sanded down too. Okay, next I'm going to take my 2 straight tracks, or my straight pieces, and put them into the jig like so. This one actually has a little bend at the end, so I'm going to cut it off because that won't rest easy in the straight, or I'm sorry, in the jigs. So here we go. Put that in here. Okay. There's one piece. Get the other piece in there. Okay. Should look like this. Nice and straight, also evenly spaced. Okay. So next thing I want to do is put on my gloves and my goggles. Put my gloves on first. Put my pen down. Goggles. Okay. So I want to take my my flux, and I'm going to apply it to the areas where I want to solder. So I'm going to do 2 of these at once. So try like so, just apply it. So not a ton of it, but just enough so that you can see it, and it also helps kind of stabilize the support piece as you're soldering it on. Okay, I have a cut little support piece right here that I'm going to use. I'm going to check this out for a sec. Put it right there on the track. So it's laying right across and extending beyond both sides of the track on the outside. Okay, I'm going to do 3 of these at once real quick. Okay, and I sanded all these down before, so I just want to lay them across the track. Again, you want to make sure that this is all on top of a piece of tin foil. The other thing that you want to be careful of is obviously our jigs are made of wood too, so you don't want to get the flame too close to the jigs. If you are going to be soldering kind of close to the jigs, you want to make sure that your flame is facing in a direction that's away from the jigs, but I'm just going to kind of scoot these out so that I have plenty of space between the area that I'm soldering and the wooden jig. Okay? In my left hand, I'm going to hold the solder like so. You want to make sure that it's extended out at least like 6 inches so it's not getting anywhere close to your fingers, because you're going to put this close to the flame. And then in my right hand, first I'm going to light the torch. The way that I do that is I flip the on switch. You can hear the gas coming out, and then I'm going to use the lighter and just put it right up next to the area where the gas is coming out until you see a flame like this. There's actually a meter on the back so that you can adjust the height of the flame. I recommend putting it right in the very middle. Hopefully you won't have to move this very often, because you don't want the flame to be too high. You just want it to be high enough. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my solder. I'm going to approach the solder from one side of the area where I'm soldering and the flame from the other side. First, I'm going to heat it up just a little bit with the flame. And then I'm going to touch the solder down on one side of where I want the connection and bring the flame down on the other side. You'll notice that the solder will kind of heat up and bubble. As soon as it does, as soon as it heats up and turns to liquid, you can take the solder away, just keep the flame on it on the other side, and you'll notice that the solder will kind of just suck in to the other side. So now I'm done with one connection. I'm going to go ahead and do the other one because it's all hot. Again, solder coming in from one direction, flame from the other direction. Touch it down until you see the solder kind of bubble up just a little bit. You don't need that much solder. And then once the solder bubbles up, just keep the flame on it a little bit. You can see that the solder will suck in underneath, form the connection. And then I can turn off my flame. Very important. Make sure you turn it off. Don't just blow it out because you don't want gas going out all over the area. This is flammable gas that's coming out of here. Put it down. It's very hot, so I don't want to touch it, especially on the end. And then what I'm going to do is take this sponge that has water, and I'm just going to squeeze it out just a little bit. Touch it down on the areas that I just soldered, and that will help cool it down a little bit quicker. Okay. And I recommend doing just kind of one section at a time, cool it down. Okay, now I'm ready for the second section. I'm going to put my glove back on, relight the torch. Okay. Again, from one side, bring the flame in. From the other side, bring the solder in. And you're going to kind of touch them down together. You don't want the flame to be directly on the solder because then it'll just melt too quick. So again, I got the solder to melt, and I keep the flame on it just a little longer until the solder sucks in underneath. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Keep the flame kind of risen so it's not touching directly on the solder. You'll see it start to liquefy. And then I'm going to keep the flame on it. Just hold it on for a second and watch the solder kind of suck underneath. Cool. Go ahead and do this last one now. You'll notice it's pretty close to the jig. So I want to make sure that my flame is facing away from the jig. Do not put your flame towards the jig. That would not be good because it's wood and it can't ignite. Okay. Again, solder liquefies. I just keep the flame on it until the solder sucks underneath. Same thing on the other side. Solder liquefies. But you'll notice that my flame is not directly on the solder. It's on the other side. Liquefy. Keep the flame on until it sucks underneath. You'll also notice that I don't need a lot of solder for this. I just need enough that it forms the connection between the two pieces of metal. If you get too much solder, that could be bad because on the other side, where the marble is going to be rolling, that could get in the way. It could cause a bump, and you don't want to do that. Okay, so again, last step. Take my sponge, cool them all down. Just because I cooled it down does not mean it's cool enough to touch yet. I want to give it a little time to cool off before I start pulling it out. Otherwise, you could burn your hands. But I still recommend pulling it out with your gloves. And that is how you solder a straight track.